Step forward, healer. Let everyone see what a joke your gift truly is. The words echoed through the grand hall, followed by quiet laughter from the nobles who had gathered beneath the golden banners of the Leaken Kingdom. Clara Bennett stood at the center of the chamber, feeling every pair of eyes watching her. She knew why they had called her forward. They did not believe in her. They did not expect a miracle. They simply wanted a moment of entertainment. For years, Clara had been known as the weakest healer in her village. Other healers could restore strength, ease suffering, and perform remarkable acts that people admired. Clara's gift seemed different. Her hands could comfort, calm, and help small wounds recover, but nothing about her ability appeared extraordinary. Because of that, many believed she had failed to inherit the true power of a healer. Clara never argued with them. She simply continued helping whoever needed her. She believed every person deserved kindness, even when kindness was not returned. But kindness was often mistaken for weakness in a world that valued power above everything else. The Leaken Kingdom had spent generations searching for legendary healers, especially after the disappearance of the ancient blessing more than 100 years ago. Stories claim that the first healers of the kingdom carried a gift unlike any other, a blessing that could restore hope when all others had lost it. But over time, the legend became nothing more than an old tale told beside fireplaces. No one believed the forgotten blessing would ever return, especially not through someone like Clara. On that day, the royal court had gathered because the kingdom's leaders wanted to test the remaining healers. One by one, skilled healers had stepped forward and demonstrated their abilities. Then someone suggested Clara. Not because they believed she could succeed, but because they thought her failure would be amusing. Clara lowered her eyes and walked toward the ancient crystal placed in the center of the hall. At the far end of the chamber sat Ethan Blackwood, the Alpha King of the Leaken Kingdom. He had watched countless people seek recognition before his throne. Many wanted power. Many wanted admiration. But when he looked at Clara, he noticed something different. She was nervous, but she was not pretending. She was afraid, but she still stepped forward. "Do you understand what you are attempting?" Ethan asked calmly. Clara nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." "And if nothing happens?" She looked at the crystal, then back at him. "Then I will still be grateful for the chance to try." Her answer surprised him. Most people feared failure in front of the king. Clara accepted it without shame. She gently placed her hands on the ancient crystal. For several seconds nothing happened. The nobles smiled, already preparing their laughter. Then the impossible occurred. A soft golden light appeared beneath Clara's hands. The entire hall became silent. The crystal, which had remained unchanged for 100 years, began glowing with a warmth no one had seen since the days of the ancient healers. The laughter disappeared. The whispers stopped. Clara stared in disbelief as the light surrounded her hands. She had spent her entire life believing she was ordinary. She never knew the gift everyone mocked was the same blessing the kingdom had been waiting for. And as Ethan Blackwood rose from his throne, he realized something that no one else understood yet. The healer they pushed forward as a joke was the one person who carried the lost miracle of their kingdom. The golden light disappeared slowly, but the silence inside the royal hall remained. No one moved. No one knew what to say. The same people who had expected Clara Bennett to fail now stared at her, as if they were seeing her for the first time. For years, they had looked at her hands and only noticed what they could not do. They never imagined those same hands carried a blessing forgotten for a century. Clara stepped away from the ancient crystal, still trying to understand what had happened. She did not feel stronger. She did not feel different. She was still the same healer from the small village beyond the northern hills. The only difference was that everyone around her had changed the way they looked at her. The whispers that once carried amusement were now filled with uncertainty. The nobles who had pushed her forward as a joke no longer laughed. They searched for explanations. They questioned whether the ancient blessing was truly real. But Clara did not care about their surprise. Her thoughts were focused on one thing. Why had the crystal responded to her? Ethan Blackwood watched her carefully from the throne. As the Alpha King, he had witnessed many unusual events throughout his reign, but none had felt as unexpected as this. He had seen powerful warriors, talented healers, and gifted leaders stand before him. Yet none of them had awakened something that had been silent for 100 years. When the royal advisors began discussing what the discovery meant, Ethan raised his hand and the room became quiet. "The healer needs time to understand what happened," he said. Some advisors immediately questioned his decision. They believed Clara should be examined, studied, and measured against every record of the ancient blessing. But Ethan noticed something they did not. Clara was not interested in becoming important. She looked more overwhelmed than proud. She had not stepped forward seeking attention. She had simply accepted a challenge that everyone expected her to fail. Later that evening, Clara was taken to a peaceful room within the palace where she could rest. She sat near the window looking at her hands. These were the same hands she had once believed were ordinary, the same hands others had called useless. She remembered every moment she had been told she was not enough. Every time another healer received praise while she stood quietly in the background. Yet she never stopped helping people. She never allowed disappointment to make her heart cold. A gentle knock came at the door. Clara turned and saw Ethan standing there. The Alpha King had no reason to visit a village healer personally, yet he did. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Clara thought about the question. "I think I am confused more than afraid." Ethan understood. A person could prepare for failure, but it was harder to prepare for discovering something impossible about themselves. "Do you know what your ability means?" he asked. Clara looked down. "No, I only know that people expected me to be nothing." Ethan's expression softened. They were wrong. Those simple words surprised her more than the ancient blessing itself. She had spent years hearing what she could not become. No one had ever told her that she had been misunderstood. As Ethan left, Clara remained by the window, wondering what the future would bring. She did not know that the awakening of the forgotten blessing had begun a new chapter for the entire kingdom. She did not know that her gift was connected to a secret hidden by time. And she certainly did not know that the Alpha King, the one person everyone believed stood above all others, had already begun questioning everything he thought he knew about strength. The morning after the ancient crystal awakened, the royal palace felt different. The halls that once carried quiet confidence now carried questions. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened, but the one person with the fewest answers was Clara Bennett herself. She stood in the royal library surrounded by hundreds of years of history, searching through old records that might explain why the forgotten blessing had chosen her. The ancient books described healers who carried a unique gift. They were not remembered because they possessed the greatest power. They were remembered because they understood the true purpose of healing. They listened. They cared. They protected hope when others had lost it. Clara read those words carefully, realizing something important. The blessing was never meant to belong to someone who wanted recognition. It belonged to someone who understood compassion. Meanwhile, Ethan Blackwood studied the same records from another part of the library. As the Alpha King, he had spent his life learning about the history of his kingdom. He knew every important family, every royal tradition, and every legend passed down through generations. But the story of the ancient blessing had always remained incomplete. The records only spoke about a healer who would appear when the kingdom needed balance the most. They never revealed a name. They never revealed a face. Until now, Ethan found himself returning to the same question. Why? Clara. He had seen many people seek greatness. Some wanted power. Some wanted admiration. But Clara had never asked for anything. Even after the entire kingdom witnessed her gift, she still worried about whether she had caused trouble for others. That was what made her different. Later that day, Ethan invited Clara to walk through the palace gardens. The request surprised her. She expected another formal discussion about her ability, not a quiet conversation away from the attention of the court. "I want to ask you something," Ethan said. Clara looked at him. "What is it, Your Majesty? When you touched the crystal, what did you feel?" Clara thought carefully. "Warmth," she answered. "Not power. Not strength. It felt like something was remembering." Ethan listened closely. Her answer matched the ancient descriptions more than anything the scholars had discovered in decades. The blessing was not simply an ability. It was a connection, a bond between the healer and the purpose behind the gift. As they continued walking, Clara noticed something unexpected. The Alpha King was not speaking to her like a ruler questioning a subject. He was speaking to her like someone genuinely searching for understanding. Why do you believe me? Clara asked. Ethan looked toward the gardens. Because everyone else saw a reason to doubt you. I saw a reason to learn more. His answer stayed with her. For so long, Clara had been told that she was ordinary. Now the most powerful person in the kingdom was telling her that being different was not the same as being weak. However, not everyone at the palace welcomed the return of the ancient blessing. Some advisors feared that old traditions were changing too quickly. They believed the kingdom should be guided only by established families and familiar voices. Clara noticed the tension and quietly wondered if she truly belonged there. She had never wanted to stand above anyone. She had only wanted to help. That evening, as she looked at the glowing mark that had appeared when the crystal awakened, Clara realized her journey was no longer about proving she was worthy. It was about discovering why the blessing had found her. And somewhere deep, within the palace archives, a forgotten secret was waiting to reveal the truth about the healer, who had returned after 100 years. The secret hidden within the royal archives had remained untouched for generations, waiting for the right person to discover its meaning. Clara Bennett never expected that person would be her. She had spent her entire life believing she was simply a village healer with a small gift. She never imagined that ancient records would connect her hands to a blessing the kingdom had been searching for over 100 years. As Clara and Ethan Blackwood continued studying the forgotten writings, they discovered that the ancient blessing was not created for rulers, warriors, or those seeking recognition. It was created for someone who understood the true purpose of healing. The old text described a healer who would appear during a time when the kingdom needed compassion more than strength. A healer who would remind people that protecting others was not only about power, but about understanding. Clara read the words quietly, feeling a strange connection to the past. She recognized the message because it reflected the way she had always lived. She had never helped others because she expected praise. She helped because she believed every person deserved care. Ethan noticed how deeply the words affected her. You realize this was written about someone like you, he said. Clara looked away. But what if I am not the person they expected? Ethan studied her expression. Why do you believe you are not? Clara hesitated before answering. Because everyone else seems to think I should be something greater. But I am still just Clara. For a moment, Ethan remained silent. Then he gave an answer that surprised her. Perhaps that is exactly why the blessing chose you. Those words stayed with Clara. She had spent years trying to prove that she was useful. Now, she was learning that her value had never depended on proving anything. Meanwhile, the royal court continued debating what the return of the ancient blessing meant for the future of the kingdom. Some advisors believed Clara should be placed under strict royal guidance. They feared an unknown power connected to an unknown healer could create uncertainty. Others believed the blessing itself was proof that Clara deserved respect. Ethan listened to every opinion, but he paid close attention to one thing: how people spoke about Clara when she was not in the room. Some spoke about her like she was a mystery to solve. Others spoke about her like she was a person to understand. Ethan knew the difference mattered. Later that evening, Clara walked through the palace halls and noticed something she never expected. People who once looked at her with amusement now looked at her with curiosity and respect. But she also noticed something else. Respect earned through a gift felt different from respect earned through kindness. She did not want people to value her only because of the ancient blessing. She wanted them to remember the person she had always been. When Ethan found her in the garden, he understood the concern written on her face. You are worried they only see the blessing, he said. Clara nodded. I do not want to become important because of something I did not choose. Ethan smiled gently. Then keep being the person who was important before anyone knew about the blessing. His words brought her peace. But before their conversation could continue, a royal messenger arrived carrying new information from the archives. The final pages of the ancient records had been found. They revealed that the last ancient healer had left behind one final message, not about power, but about the person who would inherit the blessing. And when Clara read those words, she discovered that the greatest challenge ahead would not be awakening her gift. It would be convincing the kingdom to understand the heart behind it. The final pages of the ancient records revealed a message that changed the way Clara Bennett understood her gift. For 100 years, people had searched for the return of the ancient blessing, believing it would appear through someone extraordinary. A powerful figure. A person with a legendary name. Someone the kingdom could easily recognize. But the words written by the last ancient healer told a different story. The blessing would not choose the strongest person. It would choose the person who never stopped caring when the world stopped noticing. Clara read the message again and again, unable to believe it described her. She remembered the years when others called her abilities insignificant. She remembered watching other healers receive praise while she quietly helped those who had nowhere else to turn. She never thought those moments mattered. Now she realized every small act of kindness had been shaping the person she had become. Ethan Blackwood stood beside her as she read the ancient words. The Alpha King had spent his life surrounded by expectations. People believed a ruler needed to be confident, powerful, and impossible to question. But Clara had shown him another kind of strength. The kind that did not need attention to exist. You understand now why the blessing chose you, Ethan said. Clara looked at the glowing mark on her hand. I understand why it appeared. But I still do not know what I am supposed to do with it. Ethan answered honestly. Perhaps the kingdom does not need someone who has every answer. Perhaps it needs someone willing to search for them. His words gave her comfort, but Clara knew a greater challenge was waiting. The royal court still struggled to accept her place. Some advisors believed the ancient blessing should belong only to someone from a noble family. They questioned whether a village healer could truly represent such an important part of history. Clara heard their concerns and began wondering if leaving would make things easier for everyone. She did not want the blessing to create division. She did not want people to respect her only because of something ancient and mysterious. When she shared these thoughts with Ethan, he listened carefully. Do you believe you would have helped those villagers differently if you never had this gift? He asked. Clara thought about it. No. Then the blessing did not create who you are, Ethan replied. It only revealed what was already there. That truth reached deeper than any ancient record. Clara realized the magic in her hands was not the reason she mattered. It was simply a reflection of the compassion she had carried all along. In the days that followed, Clara began learning more about the ancient blessing. She discovered that it responded not only to healing but also to intention. The gift became stronger when she acted with patience and understanding. It could not be controlled through pride or ambition. It followed the heart of the person who carried it. Ethan watched her grow more confident, not because she became more powerful, but because she finally stopped seeing herself as someone who needed to prove her worth. However, beyond the palace walls, rumors continued spreading. Some people celebrated the return of the lost healer. Others waited for her to fail. They believed a miracle could not belong to someone they had already dismissed. Clara knew she could not change everyone's opinion overnight, but she also knew something important. She had spent her entire life helping people without being recognized. She could continue doing the same even if the whole kingdom was watching. And as the ancient blessing awakened further, a hidden truth began emerging. Clara was not only the healer who returned after 100 years. She was the person who could bring balance back to a kingdom that had forgotten what true strength meant. The days after the ancient message was revealed brought a new challenge for Clara Bennett. She had discovered the truth behind the ancient blessing, but understanding its purpose was only the beginning. The kingdom was watching her now. Some looked at her with hope, while others waited for her to prove that their doubts were correct. Clara had spent her life helping people quietly, never expecting. The hidden message beneath the ancient archives revealed that the return of the ancient blessing was not only a gift, but also a responsibility that would test the heart of the person who carried it. Clara Bennett spent the following days studying the forgotten records, searching for answers about the promise left behind by the healers of the past. The more she learned, the more she realized that the blessing was never created to make one person greater than everyone else. It was created to bring people together when they had forgotten how to trust one another. Ethan Blackwood continued supporting Clara as she uncovered the history of her gift. As the Alpha King, he had always believed leadership meant carrying every burden alone. But Clara had slowly changed the way he viewed his role. She showed him that a ruler did not become weaker by listening. A kingdom did not lose strength by showing compassion. One evening, Clara and Ethan discovered a hidden chamber beneath the royal library containing the final records of the ancient healers. Inside were stories of healers who had once worked beside the first rulers of the kingdom. They were not advisors because they demanded influence. They were respected because they understood the needs of ordinary people. Clara carefully read the final words written by the last healer. The blessing will return when the world remembers that healing is not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope. The message touched Clara deeply. She finally understood why the blessing had chosen her. It was not because she was the strongest healer. It was because she had continued caring even when no one noticed. Ethan watched her quietly, realizing that the kingdom had spent generations searching for a powerful miracle, while ignoring the simple kindness that created one. However, the discovery also brought new challenges. Some members of the royal council feared that the old traditions were changing too quickly. They believed the return of the ancient blessing should be controlled by those with years of experience and noble heritage. Clara did not blame them for their concerns. She understood that change could be frightening. But she also knew that ignoring the truth would not protect the kingdom. During a royal gathering, Clara was asked to demonstrate the blessing before the court. Many expected a display of extraordinary power. Instead, Clara simply helped restore a forgotten garden within the palace that had been neglected for years. She placed her hands on the old trees and flowers, not forcing them to change, but gently encouraging the life that remained within them. Slowly, new leaves appeared, and the garden that many believed was beyond recovery began to bloom again. The court became silent. They had expected a powerful display, but they witnessed something much more meaningful. Clara had not used the blessing to prove she was important. She had used it to restore something everyone had given up on. Ethan looked across the garden and saw the same person he had met when she first entered the royal hall. She was still humble. She was still kind. The only difference was that now the kingdom finally saw what he had already understood. Clara Bennett was not valuable because she carried an ancient gift. The ancient gift was valuable because it had chosen someone like Clara. Yet as the garden bloomed, a final secret began to emerge from the old records. The ancient blessing had returned for a reason, and the next chapter of the kingdom's future depended on whether Clara and Ethan could uncover the truth before time ran out. The discovery hidden within the ancient records revealed that the ancient blessing was connected to a promise made long before Clara Bennett was born. It was not a promise of power or control. It was a promise that one day, when the kingdom needed understanding more than ever, a healer would appear and remind everyone what true strength meant. Clara carried that message with her as she continued learning about the blessing. She no longer saw it as something that separated her from others. Instead, she saw it as a responsibility to serve them. Ethan Blackwood noticed the change in her. When Clara first arrived at the palace, she had carried herself like someone who believed she did not belong. Now she walked through the halls with quiet confidence, not because she wanted recognition, but because she understood her purpose. The Alpha King admired that more than any display of power. One morning, a group of villagers arrived at the palace seeking help. They had traveled many miles because they heard rumors about the healer who had awakened the lost blessing. Some came hoping for a miracle. Others came simply hoping someone would listen. Clara welcomed them all. She spent hours hearing their concerns, offering comfort, and using her gift carefully. She never treated the blessing like something that made her better than anyone else. She treated it like a way to help people who needed hope. Ethan watched from a distance and realized the kingdom had misunderstood greatness for generations. They had always searched for someone powerful enough to protect them. They had forgotten that someone compassionate enough to understand them could be just as important. However, not everyone accepted the changes happening within the kingdom. Some members of the council believed Clara's influence was becoming too significant. They worried that traditions were disappearing and that the old ways were being forgotten. During a meeting in the royal hall, Clara heard their concerns directly. "The blessing may have chosen you," one advisor said, "but that does not mean the entire kingdom should change because of it." Clara remained calm. She understood their fear because she had once feared change herself. "I do not want the kingdom to change because of me," she replied. "I want it to remember the people it was created to protect." Her words surprised the room. She was not asking for authority. She was asking for understanding. Ethan stood beside her, knowing that this was the moment when the kingdom needed to hear the truth. "A ruler who refuses to learn from the people will eventually stop understanding them," he said. "The ancient blessing did not return to give us another reason to divide. It returned to remind us what we lost. The hall became quiet. For the first time, many began to see that Clara was not challenging the kingdom's traditions. She was restoring the meaning behind them. Later that evening, Clara walked through the palace garden that had bloomed again because of the blessing. She touched the flowers gently and smiled. She thought about how different her life had become. Not long ago, people had laughed when she stepped forward. Now they looked to her for hope. But Clara knew the most important thing had never changed. She was still the same healer who believed every person mattered. Ethan joined her in the garden, and together they looked across the kingdom below. They both understood that the hardest part of the journey was not discovering the blessing. It was helping everyone understand why it had returned. And as the final pages of the ancient records revealed a hidden truth about the future of the kingdom, Clara realized the greatest test of the ancient blessing was still waiting ahead. The final pages of the ancient records were finally revealed, and Clara Bennett discovered the truth that had been hidden for 100 years. The ancient blessing was never meant to create a person above everyone else. It was never meant to place one healer on a throne, or give someone the power to control others. The blessing existed for one simple purpose: to remind the kingdom that kindness, understanding, and compassion were the greatest forms of strength. Clara read the words slowly, feeling the meaning behind every sentence. She thought about the journey that brought her there. She remembered the day she stood in the royal hall while people laughed at her. She remembered believing that her small gift had no value. She remembered all the moments when she helped others without anyone noticing. Now she understood that those moments were never meaningless. They were the reason the blessing had found her. Ethan Blackwood stood beside her as the final message was read aloud. The Alpha King had changed more than he ever expected. He once believed that protecting a kingdom required having all the answers. But Clara showed him that a true leader also needed the courage to listen. Together, they brought the ancient promise back to the people. The kingdom slowly began to change. Villagers who once felt forgotten were given a voice. Healers who had been overlooked were respected. The old traditions were not destroyed. They were renewed with a deeper understanding of their original purpose. Clara never became someone who stood above others. Instead, she became someone who stood beside them. That was why people trusted her. Not because of the ancient blessing, but because of the heart behind it. 1 year later, the garden that Clara had restored became a symbol throughout the kingdom. People traveled from distant lands to see the place where the forgotten blessing had returned. But Clara always reminded them that the miracle was not the garden itself. The miracle was that people had remembered how to care again. Ethan often watched her speak with villagers, children, and healers from every corner of the kingdom. He saw the same person he had first noticed in the royal hall. She was still humble. She was still gentle. She was still the healer who stepped forward, even when everyone expected her to fail. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Ethan and Clara stood together overlooking the kingdom. "Do you ever miss the life you had before all of this?" Ethan asked. Clara smiled softly. "Sometimes. But I think every moment led me here." Ethan looked across the kingdom and understood something important. The greatest blessing had never been the magic that appeared after 100 years. The greatest blessing was the person who carried it. Clara had taught an entire kingdom that being overlooked did not mean being insignificant. Being gentle did not mean being weak. And being different did not mean belonging anywhere less. The girl who was once pushed forward as a joke became the healer who restored hope to a forgotten world. The ancient blessing returned, not because the kingdom found someone extraordinary, but because it finally recognized the extraordinary person who had been there all along.